I have a confession. I am addicted to memes. Cute ones, silly ones, and downright thought-provoking ones. Has anyone else here dabbled with memes? A few. For the uninitiated, a meme is an image, video, or piece of text that's typically humorous in nature and that is spread rapidly by internet users. And that's the key point. What makes them even more magic is how simple they are to share and access. Sadly, for the world of financial services, life isn't just memes. And accidentally or maliciously leaking information to the wrong person can result in catastrophic results. You only need to look at what happened at Equifax for a case study on just how wrong it can go. So when it comes to sharing sensitive information, banks get serious. And unfortunately for the user experience, serious tends to mean that it gets ugly and it gets incredibly frustrating to use. So what? In this regulatory age, it's ultimately about the security. Well, I'm sure no one here will be surprised to hear, but a recent survey by Capita found that poor customer experiences played a key role in repelling talent. And I'd be surprised if not everyone in this room had a story about the amount of time they'd wasted with painful and frustrating security processes. It's these two worlds of consumer desires and regulatory compliance that Pushfor is looking to harmonize. Our core mission is to protect businesses' content no matter where it goes. We do this using a patented technology which pushes content rather than sending it. The difference between a push and a send is that pushed content stays secure by design at source. Nothing ever resides on the end device. So what this means is there's no physical file on the phone or the laptop to be hacked into or accidentally or maliciously forwarded on. So we mitigate one of the biggest causes of data breaches, human error. And because we're in the DNA of the content, we have total understanding of how it's used. So, how better to explain this? Well, the way we send information today is a bit like how we used to rent movies from Blockbuster. And pushing is like Netflix. 10 years ago, if you wanted to rent the latest DVD, you would physically walk down to Blockbuster, pick up a copy, and bring it home. And of course, and a couple of days later, there'd be knockoff pirate copies down the local car boot sales and all manner of locations. And the distributor, Blockbuster, had no idea what you'd done with that information. Fast forward to today, and if you asked your kids to walk 10 or 20 minutes to the local video store, they'd think you were insane. Our expectation is for instant access, anywhere, anytime. And of course, Netflix is happy to provide as they can protect their IP from all manner of malicious piracy. And they know exactly what you're viewing, so they can recommend better products and better services. The way corporates send information today is like Blockbuster. Physical copies are scattered across phones, devices, with varying levels of security and limited to no understanding of how they're being used. So it's no wonder that a quarter of all data breaches source back to leaky devices. We give our clients the tools to control and track their content wherever it goes. And of course, it looks beautiful and it's incredibly simple to use. So, who's trying to harness these two forces of consumer desires and regulatory compliance? Who would be brave enough to tame and ride these wild horses? Well, thankfully, we've got a pretty great team to support that. And like all good startups, we began life in a coffee shop. We've subsequently outgrown our co-working spaces and into our very own headquarters in suburban Wimbledon. We've also just opened up a serviced office on the West Coast to support our North America clients. Now, while protecting content and mitigating human error is at our core, it was actually during our first engagement with a bank that we began to boil down the efficiencies we could deliver into a science. During this time with the bank, we discovered that the average front office employee would spend 20 minutes a day logging into and accessing sensitive information. We assumed, rather naively, that this number would come down as we went up the ranks of the bank. Thankfully for our business case, it did not. In fact, in many cases, the further up the food chain we went, the more often sensitive information was bled out of secure environments and into unsanctioned tools like email, WhatsApp, and Dropbox. It was at this point we had our eureka moment. What if we could take our secure, sharing, patented technology and deliver it as a simple-to-access digital vault? How much time could we save? It turned out tens of thousands of hours. Now, while we work across a couple of different use cases in retail, insurance, and investment, the client story we're going to tell you about today relates to one who used us for mergers and acquisitions. The reason we've chosen this client is because we see the M&A process as ripe for an experience overhaul. And obviously, data leaks can play a large part in killing a deal. You only need to look at the recent Kraft and Unilever failure to see that. So to help me with this next stage of the story, I'm actually going to invite one of my colleagues onto the stage, Denisa Castrati, as she played a key part in turning this client project into a tremendous success. Denisa, everyone big hand.
Thanks.
Hello,
Hey.
welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
So, Denisa, before we kick off, can you tell us a little bit more about your role at Pushfor?
Yes, so my role at Pushfor is Product and Client Solutions Manager. So what that means is I work with the delivery team as well as the development team and ultimately directly with the client to deliver a fit enough solution at the end.
And obviously you manage those salespeople with an iron rod, yeah?
Yeah, I know how to manage you daily.
Yeah. So, very good. Can you tell us a little bit about, or tell everyone here a little bit about the problem that the client faced?
Yes, so the client was working on a merger across 4,000 different stakeholders across 12 countries, and not only 12 countries, but also 5 different languages as well. So we had to deliver in those areas, as well as being able to restrict that content in those languages as well.
Okay, so highly mobile stakeholders, a lot of them, a lot of different requirements, complex. So what solutions were on the table to try and solve that problem?
So the first question the client has to ask themselves was, do we build this, which I'm sure some of you are aware is very, very time consuming and could cost a lot of money. And the other solution was buy, which obviously works out for us. They decided to go down the buy route. Down the buy route, they had 3 options again. The first being encrypted emails and data rooms. The second was a DRM system provided by the world's biggest computer provider. And last but not least, us. And obviously, as we know, they decide to go for us in the end.
Cool. Okay. And so can you tell me a little bit about why they felt the solution that Pushfor offered was unique?
Yeah, there were a couple of reasons. So Pushfor is obviously secure. It's simple. We were able to restrict all that content in those countries and languages, but ultimately we were able to deliver quickly. I think that's what put us as front runners for this project.
Excellent. Excellent. Fab. And, okay, since it's a techie conference, I'm sure there's some other people in the room in that sphere.
Yep.
Why did they think our security was unique?
So when we look at security, I think a lot of people look at securing the server. but almost protecting your castle, if you will. But what Pushfor does is actually protecting that content when it gets out into the wild. How do we mitigate that issue? How do we solve the problem of the weakest link, which is human error, as you pointed out earlier? And when you don't send content, when there's no physical copy of that content on end users' devices, we're actually stopping that problem altogether. And that's what ultimately helped.
Okay, last bit. So what were the hard benefits that this customer saw?
Well, there were no data leaks, so that was obviously a huge success for us. But when we look at the time efficiency, we actually saved the client over 50,000 hours, and that's just on efficiency. And that actually led to over 2 million actually pounds of savings as well. So I think they made the best decision in the end.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, so huge efficiency saving. Doesn't even take into account all the fees that weren't charged. Last quick question before we finish.
Yeah.
What would be your song for the Spotify playlist, and what would be your craft beer of choice?
Well, we're called Pushfor, and as you know, Will, our Pushfor anthem is "Push It" by Salt and Pepper. So that'd have to be the one. I'm not really a beer drinker, so I'd have to go for a Pinot Grigio.
Okay, very good. All right, well, before we wrap up, we'd like to leave you in true form with one last meme. If you got a penny for every time security wasted your time, how many pennies could you save? We've been Pushfor. Please come by our stand, and we'd love to talk more. Thanks.
Thank you.